Hi, everyone. This is Kristen Darcy, and I am over the moon excited for day two, Tuesday, April 5th, of the Divorcing and Tax Summit. I have to tell you, I am so appreciative and so excited about this conversation about today's theme, which is now what? Managing the new normal. And so excited to have Tristan Combs. Did I say it correctly?
You're close.
Okay, you say it.
It's Tristan DeComas.
DeComas. Oh, see, we were talking before we went live about how I was so concerned about it, but thank you so much. And our topic today is better communication with the BIFF response. And I'm going to give everybody the update about who you are and why we're having this important conversation.
Okay.
And so Tristan is the coordinator of the BIFF Response Project, an offshoot of the High Conflict Institute. And I encourage everyone to visit the High Conflict Institute website, and is an integral part thereof. You've earned a paralegal science degree and have over 20 years of experience in civil litigation, probate, and family law mediation. You are the BIFF coordinator, and you direct the projects and have regular posts. So that's why I'm saying it again. You have to visit www.biffresponse.com to keep in touch and run social media and work with the HCI, which is the High Conflict Institute trainers, to provide seminars. So it is such a privilege that you're here to talk about the BIFF response. And we were just talking, we had a little bit of time, just you and we were talking about how these books just seem to walk away whenever we do a live seminar. So I'm so grateful that you're here to answer these important questions and teach us about the power of the BIFF response. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, because it's such an important subject, obviously one of my favorites. And, it really, really, really helps people. It takes a little bit of getting used to. It takes a lot of digging around in the background. A lot of what we do for BIFF responses or for the High Conflict Institute overall is teaching sort of the layman's psychology behind why people do certain things. What are the patterns they're demonstrating? What can I learn about these patterns? And because at that point, it's empowering. If you know it's coming, you know what to expect, you know what to do. It's kind of like, a baseball. If you're playing a baseball game, you know what a curveball is if you play, and you presumably, know how to hit it. If it's low to the ground, if it's higher, if it's outside, if it's inside, you have these strategies and you anticipate that these things might happen. You don't know exactly when it may happen, but it will. And so if you're prepared, then you can deal with it more effectively and without making yourself so crazy in the process. And hopefully the goal is to simply make your conversations shorter if they're the type that are out of control, a lot more productive, a lot less of the aggravating things that can happen, name callings, upset feelings, all those kinds of things that come out. So behind all that is the psychology of what we call the high conflict person. And so learning those patterns is sort of underlying the BIFF response technique, which then takes your knowledge of those patterns of the person or people that you're dealing with, and you can apply then your BIFF response, knowing what's going to work for this particular personality type or that particular personality type. I'm sure it's way too much to go over in an interview, but that's sort of the nutshell version. And a lot of it's covered in the book that you were just showing. It's on the website. The other one, of the highconflictinstitute.com website, has a lot more of the psychology behind the high conflict people.
So who are high conflict individuals, and how do you know you're dealing with one? And the other part that I had about what you said was so important was that I feel like the BIFF response for my clients, because my wheelhouse is the emotional component. Mm-hmm. It takes the the anticipation, the anxiety out of receiving the email, because you're empowered and you know that you have these tools in your toolbox, that you're like, okay, this is this cycle again, and I'm going to just pick this toolbox, this tool, this way of responding,
Mm-hmm.
and use that pattern. So who are high conflict personalities?
Well, in some senses, we all can be. I mean, we've all been, upset. We've all been mad. We've had those feelings. We understand what it's about. Maybe you're mad at the IRS, or you're mad at somebody who gave you poor customer service. It happens. With a high conflict person, what you'll notice is there's a pattern that they're constantly in a crisis of some sort. They're frequently upset. They, have issues with their families. They may have issues on the job. They have issues in their relationships, no matter what kind of relationship it may be, whether it's a work relationship, families, marital relationships with their kids. They just have this internal struggle. And this is sort of across the board. There's 5 main types that are discussed. And if you really want to look at it, you can go into the DSM-5, I think is the most current one, or 6.
Right.
And you can look up the personality patterns that people are expected to have. But really, we're talking about in our work, the high conflict people are people that either have a personality disorder or they have traits of a personality disorder. And it doesn't really matter from our perspective for a BIFF response whether or not they're diagnosed one way or the other. What we're looking for is focusing on those patterns.
Right.
So you've got somebody who has a pattern of, say, for example, a borderline personality disorder. They have this underlying fear of being kind of abandoned. They're really clingy, and then they hate you. And then
Right.
they're really clingy, and then they want to push you away. And they do things that they really don't notice themselves. Some do, some don't. It's a matter of degree, but they don't notice themselves that they engage in these behaviors that constantly are pushing people away when their biggest fear is being pushed away. And so you'll notice they'll do things like, like I said, it's that love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you. They'll put you up on a pedestal, and then they'll slam you to the ground.
Right.
That's kind of part and parcel of borderline personality disorder. And along those lines, then you've got this whole continuum. You might have somebody that has these issues once in a while. They might do it every day. They might do it moment to moment. So, there's no point in actually diagnosing somebody, because the tools work no matter what. And it works with somebody who doesn't have a personality disorder. They may have traits of it.
Right.
But the thing you're looking for are those patterns. And so is it somebody that's constantly blaming me or blaming other people for the troubles that are going on in their life?
Right.
We have a whole book about that. It's called It's All Your Fault.
I love that book.
And that's, but it's a great book. It gives you a lot of the underlying psychology behind these 5 main personality types. But, they will be able to show you the patterns. And so when you're looking at these things, you're noticing the patterns, and you tend to know, if you've known somebody for a while, you're going to see that they have these repetitive patterns. There's a crisis. They're looking to you to help them resolve it. They may be blaming you for not resolving it, or they're blaming somebody else, and everything that's going on in their life is always somebody else's fault. And so that's usually the easiest way to spot somebody who's either got a personality disorder or traits of one, or just has that pattern.
Right.
So once you recognize who they are, it's
Right.
the pattern that makes it key. If it's somebody that has a bad temper and they kind of get upset once in a while, sure, you can use a BIFF response with them, get out of the conversation, and go along in your merry way. And you may not ever have another confrontation with this person. But if it's somebody that's an ex, for example,
Yes.
in this case,
Yes.
and if you have children together,
Yes.
there's no clean way to walk away. You're not going to be able to walk away from your children. You're not going to want to walk away from your children. So you have to be able to learn how to communicate more effectively. And the high conflict people don't make that easy. And so you may get, we kind of call it the text bombing. You might get, all of a sudden you're going to get 50 text messages, and they're all angry. And somewhere in there is going to be buried 1 or 2 nuggets of things that you actually either need to know or need to reply to.
Right.
And that's kind of where the BIFF response comes in, is wading through the 5 pages of, single spaced small font emails to find the 1 or 2 things that you might need to reply to.
Right. And so how do you know within the text bomb or the novel you get that is blameful, what, if you should even read it to find that tidbit, or if you should not respond. See, that's what I love about the books, because they help with that. Because when you're under attack from someone who has this personality or who has this pattern, it's almost, that story, the boy called cried wolf, because it's never ending, that there's a crisis and that you're to blame, and that if you only whatever, if this wouldn't happen again, because they have no interpersonal perception or awareness. There, you get to the point that you're actually numb to them. So how do you know if you should respond with the BIFF response, or just let that one fly by like the ball you're not going to hit?
That's an excellent point, and it's one of the questions that amazingly few people ask, that because our gut reaction is when somebody's attacking us, we're going to attack back. You get all of a sudden you get 20 text messages in a row, and very little, if anything, says anything that you actually either want to know or you need to reply to. And so our reaction to that, just as human beings, it kind of goes back to the brain science behind it all. There's the little part in your brain, the amygdala, that's kind of your fight or flight, flight or freeze. I could never say that. Basically, that's just your gut instinct response. I'm going to reply to this guy. He's a jerk. She's all wet. I don't know what she's talking about. How can you constantly blame me for these things? You're getting fired up. You're getting upset. And we don't blame you. And so what we say is, the best thing you can do is, one, anticipate it's coming. Take a deep breath, heave a heavy sigh, and go, here we go again. But this
you know what? That's a tweet right there. Anticipate it's coming,
Yeah, you just anticipate it's coming. It's going to happen. You don't know when. It's just like I was saying about the curve balls or the low balls. They're going to come. You just don't know exactly when. And so you're prepared now after you've read the book. You've gone through, maybe the coaching, or you've watched the video or whatever. You've done your part to learn about the patterns of behavior behind them and how to respond to it. And it's like, okay, here we go again. So I got this 10-page email. I'm going to skim through it, because generally speaking, one of the quick ways you could do that is usually what they'll say. Almost everybody does this at the beginning of their paragraph. Will be whatever it is that subject is going to be of that paragraph. And if that first line or that last line of the paragraph doesn't say something touching on a subject you think you want to know about, and something real for children, a pickup time, somebody's got to get a homework assignment done, there's a doctor appointment on Tuesday, those kinds of things. Weed through all the name calling and the insults and the blame. Let it go. Just pick through it, scan through it, find out if there's something that actually needs a response. And that's one of the hardest parts, because you have to turn off that defense mechanism in yourself. You can't control them, but you can control yourself with a little effort. And the beauty of it is, once you do it for, a long period of time, unfortunately, you kind of have to do that. But once you get yourself accustomed to that, you'll find that it gets a lot easier to just let it go. You'll find that it gets a lot easier to skim through the 2 or 3 pages of texts or emails or whatever you're getting, and to pick out little bits of information. Okay, yep, Johnny's got a doctor appointment at 2:00 on Thursday. And then you type out your quick BIFF response. And I'm assuming at some point we'll go through the 4 steps, but it's brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
Right.
And you keep that in mind. It's a little more complicated than it sounds, but once you get the hang of it, it's really simple to do. So you keep it brief. That's easy. 2 or 3 sentences are usually. You've got 3 pages of email. Johnny's got a doctor appointment at 2:00 on Tuesday. That's all you need to know.
Right.
And you can simply say, okay, thank you for the information. That's friendly. You don't have to say, gee, I'm really grateful and I so appreciate you writing. Don't go over the top. It's just polite. I mean, really, we could have called it BIPF, but you can't say it. So it's, it's that BIFF thing.
No. The BIFF is better. Brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
Right. And friendly actually throws people, because when we think of being friendly, they think of kind of over the top. I'm not going to be friendly to that so-and-so. She's always attacking me and I'm not going to do it. Well, there's actually, again, to the brain science behind that is being polite, being civil is one of those things that helps diffuse somebody who's stuck. And one of the things that we're kind of going back to the patterns is that they get stuck in these patterns.
Right.
They need help to get out of these patterns, to break free of these patterns. And if you think of every email or text message or every event, for lack of a better frame, if you think of those as each little event as its own little microcosm, if nothing else, then you can say, okay, I need to help him calm down, or I'm never going to get out of this. It's all about self-preservation. It's all about trying to get yourself out of the conversation as quickly and civilly as you can, not losing your cool yourself. And to do that, we often have to do what's counterintuitive, which is to be nice to somebody who's attacking us, because they react really the same way the rest of us do. If I'm mad and somebody looks at me and says, I understand you're upset, let's see what we can do about that, I'm going to immediately start calming down.
Right.
And I don't really have control over that. And it's the same thing with the high conflict people. I can rant and rave, I can get mad at you, I can meet you blow for blow if you really want me to, but then I'm stuck.
Right.
And I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So what is so powerful about what you're saying is that, of course, there's a pattern to this communication bomb that you could say, or communication ball that's thrown your way, but it's also your pattern. And there has to be a way that you feel emotionally worthy or emotionally secure enough to know that you don't have to defend yourself against what's coming. Mm-hmm. And that word that you said, I understand, mm-hmm. I actually have my clients, and I actually have it on my computer on a sticky note, I understand. Because those are two powerful words that you can use within your BIFF response that diffuses it.
It really is, and it's a good phrase to use. It's short, it's to the point. It helps diffuse the other person, and helps, honestly, once you feel a little more calm, it's easier for you to calm the other person down. And so that friendly component of the BIFF response is really quite important. You can't leave it out. And I have had people say, I just want to do BIFF with one F. And it's like, well, you can try it. You probably have a certain amount of success, but it's really going to work a lot better because you're calming yourself, you're calming the other person, and then you're able to communicate only that information that you want. So brief, pretty cut and dry, 2-3 sentences are almost always all you need. Informative, that's the part where you're sticking to the facts. Johnny's got an appointment at 2:00 on Tuesday, and your response, you've picked that little piece out of 20 text messages you just received, and it's like, thank you for the information about the doctor appointment. I'll be sure and I check in with you afterward to see what the doctor has to say. Have a nice day. And that's it. That's all you have to say. And it lets you let go, because you really do kind of struggle. And even I do too, because I get a lot of people that call me up and they are not happy. And they it helps me let go of that. I've been called names. I've been the target of blame. I mean, everybody has. And so it helps me let go. Okay, I'm done with this conversation. I don't have to believe everything that he or she just said. Right. I don't have to take it to heart. And that takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it, it is empowering. You know that you can do these things that will help end a conversation civilly, and you're done with it. And so that's the kind of thing that you can do. And so that was brief, informative, friendly, and firm. The firm part is that you're implying without saying it directly that I'm done with this conversation. And if you'll notice, what I said was, thank you, and I will check in with you afterwards to see what the doctor said. Right. There's not a lot else. There's not a lot else they can say. They can probably make up stuff, but there's not a lot of stuff that somebody else can come back at you with about that statement. Right. And if they do, you could ignore it. If they don't call me, I'll call you, and all that kind of stuff, just ignore it. It doesn't have anything to do with the matter at hand. You're focusing in on that one piece of information. There's a doctor appointment and I want to know what was said. I'll deal with it later. And so you're giving them that implication that you are not, or the indication indirectly that I'm not going to talk to you anymore about this. Right. I've said what I need to say. That's firm, but it's being indirectly. You're not going to say, I'm not talking to you about it anymore, because then they're going to get mad. Right. So it's very subtle. And so the goal is to give them as little as possible to come back at you with. And so you're crafting these responses very carefully with the goal of ending the conversation so you can get back to your life. You can go back to the park, you can go back to work, you can go feed the kids,
Right.
whatever it is that you need to do, you can get back to it, and you can kind of train yourself over time to let go of the things that kind of emotionally make you upset. But that's a big step, is you're not engaging yourself. And that is very powerful. It cuts down on that tendency, and I hate to say it, especially of women, to dwell on things. It's like,
Right.
he said this and he said that, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm up all night, and it's turning, and I don't have that
Right.
little magic switch to turn it off.
Right.
It helps to alleviate that, because you're not allowing yourself to engage in the first place.
Right.
And you're giving yourself permission to, ignore the barrage of further emails or texts that you may get, because you already know they're not going to say anything that you really want or need to know.
Right. Or need to even have in your consciousness.
Exactly.
I think for me, when I first started using it, I would, in my mind's eye, think thank you said something else. So even even when I was typing thank you, in my mind it meant something else. And so it was kind of empowering, because it was like, you know what, really, I'm saying thank you, but inside of my mind it means maybe something else. And I would giggle, because it would shift. I would use the BIFF response, use the pattern, but it was almost playing a little game with myself before I could fake it and make it, and not have that
Right. It does make a lot of sense, because I mean, we're human. We have physiological responses. We have, we're afraid. If I get an email like that, I'm afraid. I don't want to look at it. I know, I mean, it's not going to physically be damaging, but I know it's going to make me upset. I know I'm not going to like it. And all these, electronic pulses are going off in your brain saying, I got to fight this. I have to do this. I have to do that. And so one of the other things, like I said, about the BIFF response, is that it really lets you give yourself permission to let it go.
Well, you know what it does? It creates oxygen. Because you're bringing oxygen to yourself, so that your body can go through the responses that it's typical and normal to go through. And it also, on the other hand, empowers you to know, oh, I got this. I got this. You see that email come in and you have that physiological response to it, and then you're like, no, I got this. I know what I can do about it. And I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about, we talked about the pattern communication and identifying, the behaviors. So then when you start using this response and you start having this boundary that, okay, this is the new normal, this is the new way I'm going to manage our dialoguing, because chances are, if you have a relationship with this person, it was probably unconscious to you that this is how you were treated beforehand. But now that you're removed from that situation, it's more, you're more aware. And now you're like, oh my gosh, now I see this as a pattern that was in our relationship. So can you talk a little bit about, knowing that the behaviors, and it could be abusive behaviors, because what they're saying, in the communications, either verbally or through email or text, is, emotional. It could be emotional abuse. And so
yes,
you need to be prepared that this will be intensified, maybe, within these specific personalities.
Yes, and actually you can, I've been doing divorce mediation for almost time out of mind, and so I've seen and been divorced myself, so I can see it, that these patterns that have now become maybe more clear to you or more noticeable to you. If you do look back, you'll see that they probably were there all along. And chances are, if you're dealing with a true, personality disordered person, it's miserable for them. This split represents a tremendous loss. They don't necessarily understand why they behave the way they do. I'd go out and, not being a psychologist, I would go out and say that most of them don't. Without intensive therapy, there's really nothing we can do to change them. And they don't know either. It's like a blind person. You wouldn't look at them and say, hey, you could see if you would just try harder. They can't. And it's their brain, it's their physiology, it's the wiring, it's, the nurture and the nature and everything else. They don't have control over it. And so, you have to understand that when you're dealing with them, that it's now we've created this big loss, this big void. For a narcissistic personality, it's lack of control. For a
Yes.
borderline personality, it's going to be, oh my gosh, you abandoned me. I'm going to do everything I can to get your attention, good or bad. You
Yes.
know, and those are the two main types that you see most often.
And then you have the narcissistic borderline personality, which you
Yeah.
can combine both of those.
There's a lot of crossover. There's
Right.
a lot of crossover, and it's very difficult sometimes when I'm listening to people to try and figure out which type of person I'm dealing with to help them. And so, again, I always encourage people, you don't have to worry so much about an actual diagnosis, but look for the patterns. What do they do? Do they react every time I say, I'm not talking to you anymore? Do they show up at your door?
Right.
Then you're thinking maybe this is somebody that's either got a very big fear of abandonment, or you've just cut off their control, and so they're going to do what they can to up the ante. But getting back to your original question, yes, you can almost virtually guarantee that it's going to intensify for almost everybody in the beginning. Yes. People are upset. This break has left a giant hole in this plan that you had for your life when you got married. And everybody's scrambling to fill this void with new information and a new plan and a new hope for your future. And so that's understandable. If you've got somebody on the personality disordered end of things, they're going to really struggle with that. And what they tend to do is that they're going to intensify their efforts to stay in contact with you, keep you engaged, control you if that's their issue. I will know you can't see the kids because you didn't do what I wanted to do, those kinds of things. You could definitely expect it to intensify. For a lot of people, it drops off over time. That's kind of the normal course of, you get through that anger, you go through those stages of grief that everybody knows about. You get through the anger phase, and then you start getting to the acceptance phase, and it starts to fade over time. You might still have your little tiffs here and there, but in the best case scenario, most of that'll fade over time. Most of the time you won't need a BIFF response, so you won't need us. That was sort of not self-serving, but it's true.
Well, I think once you start using this as a tool, brief, informative, friendly, and firm, and I really encourage people to get the book or and visit your site, because it parlays into all different portions of your life. Even if I find myself articulating a BIFF response in a high conflict conversation, and afterwards I'm like, oh, I just biffed. Like you don't even, I'm sure you find yourself doing that too. That it's just it's such a powerful way of communicating, because you're not putting accelerant on the fire, basically.
Right. Exactly. And it really is. It's just the 4 simple steps. Once you kind of master them, and it does take practice, you can use that in all walks of life. If you're in customer service, you get customer service client calls, and chances are they're not happy if they're calling you. So they're already upset. You can use these methods to help work with them. If you've got, a therapist, you've got a client in the office that's really, being very difficult, you can use BIFF responses in that context. You can use it with your kids, and they don't even know what you're doing.
I know. And I have actually helped my children. My son is turning 18 and my daughter's turning 13. And, the middle school years, that can be tough. And so when you're dealing with, typical normal behavior, and which sometimes for me, what I've noticed within, my personal life and the clients that I'm helping with their families, the BIFF response, having a child be empowered with that, even talking to that high conflict parent, teaching them, okay, let's see if you should respond. You should respond. How can you be brief, informative, friendly, and firm, and speak your truth? And I think at the end of the day, that's what the BIFF response does, is it helps you open that throat chakra, and you speak your truth in a way that is respectful.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I encourage people to model for their children. It's kind of, you have to do it with age appropriateness, but kids really grab onto things like acronyms like BIFF.
Right.
It's really easy for them, probably easier than adults. For one thing, they haven't built up all these automatic resistances to things in life and a difficult X. They understand that if they see dad talking to an irate mother, they know dad's being calm. They know mom's being irate. They may not understand exactly why, but they do see the difference. And you can model that behavior. If you're using a BIFF out loud verbally, then the kids are going to pick up on that. As they get a little bit older, you can, break it down to them. Okay, is that a friendly response? Is that something you would say? Pick it out. What would you like to say? Do you need to say anything? That's always the biggest hurdle. That's
Right.
always for everybody, grown-ups and everybody. Do we need to say anything at all, or do we care that they just called us names? It's really sticks and stones can break my bones. It's an opinion. You don't like the way I look, fine. Plenty of other people do. I like the way I look. I don't care what you think. You have to give yourself permission to say, I don't care what you think.
Well, what, Rangewire has that quote that I share so often, what you think of me is none of my business.
Exactly.
And that's what, God bless his soul. That's what, I say to my kids, what they think of you isn't your opinion. And if they're, seeing a parent that has rage, that responds in rage, that, communication style might be abrasive, it's so powering to keep in your power. If you say it like that, stay in your power, stay in your power. And by staying in your power, you have that self-calming, that self-nurturing, and then you BIFF, brief. You know what? I would like to talk to you about XYZ, and I hear that we're supposed to be doing whatever, and although I would love to do that with you, I'm not able, so there's your, your BIFF, but it's practice. And I think that's what we should talk about lastly is how do you practice this, and what are some of the tips that you could do if you're in practice? No different if you're in practice, catching that baseball or swinging at that baseball. How do you practice at a BIFF?
Well, one of the things you can do is write it out. And the beauty of a BIFF is that it's most effective with, obviously, with a written conversation of some sort because you have time to think.
Right.
You can do it verbally. Takes a little more practice because you're kind of doing it on the fly.
Right.
And there's another method that I'll mention briefly. We call it EAR, E-A-R. It's empathy, attention, and respect. And anybody can log on to the website. There's a video about it. There's articles about it. But basically, it's a way of, it's kind of like the verbal version of BIFF, where you're, again, focusing on that brain science, but you're talking to you don't want to talk to the person's amygdala. You're talking to the person's logical brain. And so there's tips and tricks there. So there is a companion to BIFF. Without belaboring the point, people can look that up on the website. But to practice it I always tell people, read all you can, and quality information, please, but read all you can about high conflict personality patterns of the type of personality that you're most concerned with. And in this case, it's going to be an X. And so your X better than probably his mother does or her mother does. Take what you learned, find out what those patterns are, and then focus in on that section of the book. There's, because it's broken down. There's borderline. Is it histrionic? Is it, narcissistic? And there's probably traits of the others, as you had mentioned earlier, but find those patterns and then focus on those. Okay, if I say this, what's she likely to say? How's she likely to react? Write your BIFF response out. And then what we do in our coaching for people that need more help, we actually have a structured list of 10 questions, and we'll go through it with you. But the 10 questions are actually in the second version of the book, the one that you showed earlier, to kind of check yourself. Did I say this? If I was him, how would I react to this sentence? If I were her, is she going to come attack me because I said this one word? So you have to actually kind of look at it, take a little time to digest it. And our natural instinct, if somebody sends us a text, hey, text right back, boop, send. Right. Just don't. Don't. Take your time and look at it. If you're not sure, get somebody else that you trust who knows the person, kind of knows who they are, and say, hey, I'm thinking of sending this response. Can you give it a look and see what it says? And actually, Bill Eddy, who's the founder of the High Conflict Institute, that's one of the things that we did early on when we first started thinking about BIFF responses, and giving him credit. He's the one who came up with the concept. Yes. during the course of his trainings, but also because doing our divorce mediations, it came up a lot.
Yes, yes.
And so he kind of came up with this method that it was just BIF, and then we added the other F, and then it kind of evolved now into this whole project. But back then, and even still to this day, I'll send a response to somebody. I'll get a particularly, difficult email, and I'll say, you'll know it'll push your buttons, and I'll send it off to him and say, what do you think? And he'll typically will take 2 or 3 sentences out of there and tell me to change some stuff. And so the value there is getting somebody to read that and play devil's advocate. Tell me, how do you think, my ex is going to reply to this? How do you think they're going to respond to this? Is this something that's going to get me a lot of backlash, or is it going to get me out of the conversation? So you go through that list of 10 questions.
Right.
And that's what really will give you the practice that you need. And you do it every time that you send out a response to a text or a response to an email. And it gets, like anything else, it gets a lot easier over time. And before long, you're doing things you're doing BIFFs without ever realizing it. Like you said earlier, had somebody on the phone not too long ago in a customer service capacity, and I won't name names, but they annoy me every time I have to talk to them. And I can hear it. One of the downside of treating this is that I know quickly when I'm not being BIFF, because there's this little devil I'm back here going, stop it, you're not being BIFF. And so you get used to it after a while. You kind of start doing it automatically, and you'll know if you're not doing it, which was kind of the point of that story. You'll get that little devil and angel on your shoulders, and they're going, be BIFF, and the other one's going, let him have it.
Yeah.
So you kind of So you just kind of,
that's both sides of your brain. You're so aware of it that's dealing with the situation.
Yeah, and just kind of get rid of the let them have it person and, move on, because ultimately, and I tell people, is you're not doing this for the other person. Really, you're doing it for yourself. You're doing it to save your sanity. You're doing it to get out of these conversations. You're getting it so you're not engaging and staying up all night worrying about it and not sleeping, which is going to affect your health. It'll affect your appetite. It'll affect your work. There's all sorts of things that if we had more time, you could really go deeply into it. But learning it, practicing it, getting good at it, getting comfortable with it, that's what's really going to help you in these conversations, because ultimately that's what's going to help you not engage, and it's all to help you. And so when I tell people that complain about being friendly, it's like, you're being friendly for a reason. You're being friendly to get you out of this.
Right.
This is for you.
What you said, it's about you. It feels anti-normal, if you would, because you're thinking that you're doing something, reciprocity, that you're thinking, well, I'm going to do this and he's not going to respond, or she's not going to respond in that way. But in actuality, you're creating your own karma.
You are.
Because you're being respectful. Actually, it's a mirror to you, and how you're sending out is going to come back to you. And what you said, the goal is to get you out of the conversation. And if you play that over and over in your mind, the goal is to get me out of this conversation.
Exactly. There's a lot of other benefits, though, to that, and I should mention it briefly. If you're in court, if you're in a contested issues, nowadays your Facebook, your text messages, everything will find its way into court. You have to be careful. You have to be mindful about the image that you're portraying to the decision makers. Because if you're not in mediation or something, crafting your own agreement, if you're not otherwise coming to some type of settlement, then somebody's going to be making decisions for you. And you want that somebody, whomever it may be, to see you. You don't want to show them the reactive you. You don't want to show them how you responded tit for tat to every single thing this person ever said. Most of them won't read it. They don't have time for it. They're going to look at it and go, you're both high conflict, go to counseling.
Yes.
You need to, as the person who's on the receiving end, stick to the high road. That's one of the things that a BIFF response does. It helps you to generate that image to the court, to the decision makers, that you're the one that's trying to be reasonable. You're the one that's being, problem solution focused. You're the one who's not engaging in lengthy emails. And then the other part of a BIFF response, it does have a dual purpose, and particularly if you're in court, and it's kind of important, is that if you have somebody on the other end who's subject to filing your texts and your emails or your Facebook posts, make sure that what you say doesn't reflect you in a negative light, because that'll come back to bite you. And BIFF responses help guard you against that. It shows you're on the high road. It shows that you're not engaging. It shows that you're trying to actually, stick to the facts and not do it. And when somebody says, hey, you're always late picking up the kids, and I have to do this and that and everything, and you were late once.
Right.
You need to say that to the court, because part of one of the things about a BIFF response is that you want to correct misinformation if it's potentially harming or damaging to you. If somebody calls you a bad name, or they tell the neighbors, she's a, BATCH or whatever, let it roll. Doesn't matter. Your neighbors aren't going to care. They don't have any power over you. If somebody's telling the court that you're consistently late picking up the children, well, you do need to correct that, but you need to correct it in a BIFF fashion. You could say, thank you for bringing it up. I share your concern for, punctuality, picking up the kids. The one instance on June 12th, I was 10 minutes late, and I, made sure that I texted you to make, to ensure that either one of us would be there to pick them up. I stumbled over that a bit, but something to that effect, that you're just presenting straight information. You're not saying, hey, he's a liar, and I don't always do that. And you're not going down that road to portray yourself as the high conflict person. You're biffing the judge indirectly.
But you know what, though? It's a very important tip that you brought up, because you're on your merry way doing what you need to be doing, and then you feel like you're being displayed in a negative light, and then that's that chemical reaction that you have to defend yourself. And it's just being consistent of who you are, respectful of yourself and the other people that you're dealing with, and at the end of the day, the tiger's going to show his stripes. So you just don't want to be painting stripes on yourself, right?
Exactly. And yes and no. And that is one of the difficult things about the high conflict personalities. They do what we call gather negative advocates. They are, by and large, experts at collecting people that they can convince to their point of view, whether it's a judge, an attorney, your family.
Flying monkeys. That's what I hear people call them.
Yeah, they can, and they'll do that. And it's part, I don't know, again, that they know they're doing it. They're really doing it to kind of bolster their seem, to let themselves know I'm okay, because everybody else thinks she's wrong, so she must be wrong.
Right.
And so you do want to kind of guard against that. If some of those negative advocates happen to be a judge, and it's somebody who can actually, your boss.
Yes.
Outside of divorce, it could be your boss, and you've got a difficult coworker who says, Jane's always late with her projects and we can never get anything done. And you need to correct that misinformation in a BIFF fashion, because that's potentially damaging information. Same thing with the judge. So you can pretty much anticipate that they're going to get negative advocates, and you want to watch it if they're saying things that could be potentially harmful. And that's the thing that's the one time we say that you can break from the golden rule of letting all of the negativity and stuff that doesn't matter go. If it's something that's potentially damaging, is really the benchmark there. If this could hurt me, and I mean something more than hurting my feelings, if this could bias a judge against me, if this could impact the guardian ad litem's, decision for the children, if this can, impact the custody evaluator's decision, those are things that are potentially damaging. Those kinds of statements that may come to do you some harm, do your children some harm. You want to be on the lookout for those. You don't necessarily have to reply to every single one of them. But when you do, make sure that you're presenting that in a BIFF fashion. This is the correct information. Thank you for bringing it up. I'd like to explain, my side of it without actually saying my side of it. You want to present the factual information, correct it, so it's out there. Because another interesting psychology tip is that rumors take on a life of their own.
Right.
And if you don't refute something, if you leave it, just out there and hanging, it tends to lend credibility to that claim.
Right.
And the high conflict people are already probably far more expert than you at getting people to see their way. They're very energetic. They can be very friendly, very outgoing. They can really gather these people in. You do have to watch that, in particular if you're in a court situation. Other situations that may come up with that school, something negative is being reported to the schools about you. So it can come up. You want to be aware. And then definitely pick your battles. You don't have to fight every single one of them, but get good at determining what may be potentially damaging to you or your children, and
Well,
then get corrected information out.
I think for one thing too that we can bring up for the emotional side of that is that sometimes you feel blindsided by that, especially if you're the custodial parent, you're taking care of business, you're managing your life, you're managing, your children's life, you're working full time, and then all of a sudden erroneous charge, if you will, gets brought up, and you feel blindsided by it, and then you have that initial reaction of defending yourself. But then if you go back to the BIFF and defend yourself in that format, make sure the facts are first, not the emotional part of it.
Right.
That's what is going to come through. And sometimes you have to say it over and over again, because it does become a campaign. Those negative things, like you said, take on a life of their own, and you're might be finding yourself in a place of defending yourself, but it's the manner of defending yourself. If I think that's recapping what you said.
It's exactly, it really is. And then, it's unfortunate that we don't know yet how to make somebody stop. And that's really what we all want. We all get to that point where we're just throwing our hands up in the air. It's like, blankety, blankety, blank, just stop it already.
Right.
It's a perfectly normal reaction, but the realism is that it's not probably going to stop. Some people fade over time. Some people get better. But you do have to kind of accept that, okay, I can't change him. I can't stop somebody being a drug addict. I can't stop somebody from being an alcoholic. I can't stop him from having these internal battles that, unfortunately cause him to blame me for everything. I can't stop it. So what can I do to protect myself? What can I do to protect my children? What tools do I have in my toolbox to not engage in these things, to present myself the best way I can to my children, to myself, to the court? How can I use these things that are available to me to make it as easy on me and the kids as I possibly can?
Right.
During the course of all that, you're making it easier on them too. They don't know it. You don't need to tell them. And the last thing you ever want to do is say, you're a high conflict person, because then they'll really let you have it.
Right.
So these are things that get better. Some of it's just acceptance. Some things you can change in life. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. And so once you get to the point of accepting, and that's probably the single biggest complaint I get about BIFF. Well, I did that, and he's still doing it. Yes.
But that goes back to the intention of the BIFF is to get you out of the conversation. You're not going to change the conversation. It's to get you out of the conversation. One
person at a time. Well, it does change it a little bit, because hopefully it tones it down and lets you get out of it. But the point being is that he or she has this pattern, and it's a pattern. It's not something that's going to change by anything we do. If they, get some intensive therapy, if they get some help, they can have successes. I read a lot from people that are actually suffering from the various personality disorders, and some of them are. It really is. It's tear jerking to imagine living like that. And so having that little bit of compassion, even though somebody's coming at me with the verbal acts, having that little bit of compassion for them helps me to respond in a way that's a lot more appropriate and a lot more beneficial to me. That sticking to that BIFF, sticking to the BIFF methods, because, and the bottom line is they can't change it. They probably won't. Well, maybe they could with intensive therapy, but for most people, they're not going to change. So if you know that, then okay, here it comes. I'm going to just calmly react to this, and I'll be done with it, and I'm going to disengage, and it's not going to keep me up all night, and I'm going to go get ice cream with the kids. So whatever it is, you can retrain yourself to not feel so badly about what's going on, because it will continue.
Now, I want to double back and make sure you give the information for someone who's listening, how they can reach out to you and engage as a coach in this.
Sure. The easiest way is to log on to the BIFF Response website. It's www.biffresponse.com. There's a coaching and training page. You can look through it. There's a variety of things we can do, but about halfway down the page, you could just click on the button and order a session. I'll get an email. I'll get in contact with you. I am the BIFF coach. On occasion, and one of the other people does it, but for now it's me. And so they can do that. I always encourage people to read everything you can. There's some articles that are totally free up on our website. There's more on the highconflictinstitute.com website. You can read all of those. We have videos. We have books you can order. We keep the prices as low as possible on everything so we can make them accessible to people.
Right.
And
get the book.
Yeah, get the book. If you're not a reader, that's in a video. It's also in a DVD. So there's a number of ways you can get it. But it's a great resource. It's something that, I'm sold on it, obviously, but it works.
No, it does. I have used it in my personal, divorce, which was very high conflict, which is still, it's still what it is. It's not going to change. And that's why I felt so, drawn to and so appreciative that you're here. I did have the privilege to see Bill Eadie speak and went through some training with him when he was here in Massachusetts. And, it's not just for people going through a divorce. And I know that you have other training for dealing with high conflict people in the workplace. Also, that information is on your website.
Yeah, that's on the High Conflict Institute website, or they can just shoot an email to me because I can get you pointed in the right direction no matter what. So it's info, I-N-F-O, @biffresponse.com. They can send an email. I can get you pointed in the right direction, point you at resources, set you up with coaching. If you're interested in a training for your business or your church group or your support group or whatever, we can, we have a number of different ways of getting the people or the information to you that's beneficial to the people. We're not a nonprofit, so unfortunately none of it's free, but we do try and manage the pricing to work within people's budgets to make it available to them. For the everyday people, I think the book pricing and stuff like that, most everybody can get it. And you didn't hear it from me, but I have seen them on eBay. So, if you're really in a pinch.
No, I mean, you have to check it out. And I think what you said was Unhooked is the place, but just go to the website. All this information will be underneath the video. So when you want to replay the video, all that information will be there. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much. I so appreciate our time together. And you have a goodie too. I think there's a giveaway or a discount that you're providing too.
Absolutely. The nominally priced books and videos, we're giving people a discount on those. It's the coaching for BIFF responses, and that's for people that are interested in having to teach this method to somebody else.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you're like a licensed trainer or anything. It just gives you some tips on coaching your mom through dealing with dad or your coworker on dealing with another coworker. So that's that one. There's writing a BIFF response, which is a video or a DVD. I think both of those are 15% off. The book, I think we're giving $5 off, so that'll bring it right down around the $10 mark, I believe.
That's wonderful.
So that'll help people out that are interested, and your reward for sitting through the interview.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And
thank you.
You're so helpful, and your wisdom is so spot on. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us. Bye.